Good afternoon. This is a very beautiful sight from up here, I want to tell you. All your sweet faces. So my name is, I usually use the honorific Ayya, Santussika. And I live in Northern California. After my bhikkhuni ordination, or actually the year of my bhikkhuni ordination, we started Karuna Buddhist Vihara. So it's a small forest monastery, now located on 14.5 acres of redwood forest. And I live with one other bhikkhuni, Ayya Chittananda. And right now we have an Anagarika training with us. So we look forward to offering training for more women as we go along. So I've been in robes about 18 years and a bhikkhuni for 11 years. Just to get started.
All right. They also gave me a mask when I came in, so I don't know if they want me to speak. Just to echo what Ayya Santussika said, I felt kind of the stillness when I came in here, and it's only day 2. It's amazing. So I hope we don't blow it for you by talking too much. So many of you know me. I'm Venchander, Ven for short, venerable. So I also ordained 18 years ago in Myanmar, and came in contact with Ajahn Brahm about 14 years ago, and left Myanmar to go and search out this mystery person. I had no idea really who he was or where he was. And a few years later, after being in Australia for some time and taking the bhikkhuni ordination, he asked me to go back to England, which I'd left at the age of 19, and start a monastery there. So many of you know about that and have been supporting us already. But last year we got a vihara, a property, for the first time. After 8 years of hard work, living from house to house and putting a great deal of groundwork in, we finally bought our own place, which is now Anukampa Bhikkhuni Vihara in Oxford. So, like Ayya, the intention is to start to offer more teachings, but also to train women who don't have an opportunity in the UK at all to take the full ordination. So I'm the only bhikkhuni in the country, and another bhikkhuni is coming to join me next year for a few months. And we hope to make the opportunity available to women and to all people to be able to benefit from the monastic lifestyle and actually take the full training up if that's their aspiration. So so I'm based in England and I come here every year for the Rains Retreat. That's kind of the deal. So that I actually get 3 months of solitude and time to deepen my practice. So I'm sure we'll speak more about our paths at some point. Most probably there's a question there. But shall we go to the box? Do you want to go for it?
Dear Venerable Ayya, when you body scan at the start of meditation, do you focus on one side of the limb first or both together? So I think like both arms or both legs maybe. Left toe versus right toe, or both legs, both at the same time. I see. So most of my teachers are from the Thai forest tradition, which of course you're all familiar with, as Ajahn Brahm's training also was. But there are quite a few different ways of doing body scans. So this question is very much about Ajahn Brahm's approach, I would think. Do you want to? So I actually am a little bit spontaneous with my body scan. I kind of work with it the way my body feels at the time. I might take it very slowly, just down the front of the body and then the back of the body and then down through the center core inside. That's one approach. I think however you do it, just notice how it feels. If you're using, the idea of the left toe and then the right toe and so on, or, just try it. See if it really brings relaxation and calm. See if there are pleasant feelings that arise from it. And if it's not resulting in that, then make some modifications. And one thing to be aware of is that sometimes we can get very, I want to say, regimented in our approach. And then instead of relaxing, we're really just focused on doing it right. So watch out for that, because you really just want to have the results of a completely calm, peaceful, happy body and mind. You want to add anything?
Great. All right. Dear Venerable Chanda, it's so lovely to see you again in person. Thank you. And all of you, whoever I've seen before. I missed your sutta class on social harmony relating to parent-child relationship. There's a sutta that states that giving immense riches or physically carrying a parent on one's back for 100 years could not even begin to repay a child's debt to the parent. But if a child could begin to share, show, or teach the parent some bit of Dhamma to help the parent understand that clinging is the cause of suffering, that this would go a very long way to repaying the debt to one's parents. In the context of my 88-year-old father, who's been an atheist most of his life, and in home hospice with probably 6 months to 2 years to live, kindly advise on what you would consider to be most skillful and beneficial Dhamma to share with my father with much metta. Yeah, well, when I started practicing at about 20 years old, and I did a lot of Vipassana retreats, whatever that means, a lot of meditation retreats, quite strict, and lots of meditation, and I got so much benefit. It changed my life. And I thought I really had something wonderful to share. So the first time I visited my parents, I just wanted to tell them that they had to do a retreat. They must do a retreat, And surprise, surprise, they were a little bit defensive about it. They said, well, do you think you're better than us? Or, we're quite happy, we're quite content, we don't suffer. And slowly over the next few years, I realized that wasn't the best way to attract them to the Dhamma. So over time, they started to get more curious because they could see the changes in me. And then they would actually come to me and ask a little bit about it. First of all, they wanted to know it wasn't some kind of sect that was dangerous and that was going to change me forever or make me lose my hair. But over time, they could see the change. So they got more interested and they actually came to visit me. And now when I bring Ajahn Brahm over to England, they even come to some of his talks. At first I suggested that they do, but now they just come. They make their plans and then they tell me, oh, we've booked our tickets. We've booked our trains. So my suggestion is that just as the Buddha really didn't advise monks and nuns to go around preaching, you just embody the qualities of the Dhamma around your father. You just treat him with kindness, with care, with immense gentleness and tenderness. And in that way, you're actually sharing your practice with your father. without using words. Because if you start to tell him, how he should be thinking, how he should be feeling or behaving at 88, it's unlikely to work, and moreover, he may feel judged or may feel even concerned that he hasn't, done the right things in his life. So I would say, be kind and show him that non-judgmental, unconditional love. And secondly, as he is approaching the end of his life, try to talk to him about the beautiful things he's done in his life, the way he's treated you as a child and growing up, even if there's some mistakes he's made, or even if you have a difficult relationship from time to time. It would be strange if you didn't, right? I mean, a parent and a child relationship is often complicated in some ways. So try to talk to him about the good things that he's done and the qualities you see that you admire, and remind him, that keeping these things in mind will lead him to a good place. Sometimes I ask people, like, how do you feel? Especially when children come to our vihara, actually, and they say, offer the food. And I say, how did you feel when you did that? And they say, happy, happy. But sometimes they won't realize unless you ask them. So see if you can ask your dad, about the times in his life that gave him joy, that gave him a sense of meaning and purpose, that kind of thing. So I think that's probably enough. I don't remember the exact sutta or the sutta class, but I don't know if Ayya has anything to add, because you actually cared for your mom for a very long time. I don't know.
This is also for Venerable Canda. Oh, as bhikkhunis, have you experienced much sexism? Yes. Is that enough? Gender discrimination is definitely something worth understanding and not making too much of it, because what's more important is awakening and developing those beautiful qualities that Venerable Chanda was just talking about. But it is important to be able to, in our own ways, resist that in ways that are appropriate to the Dhamma. And, sexism isn't the only thing that we need to look at in this way. The Buddha really was clear that as human beings, we're on the wrong track if we're discriminating against people based on all kinds of different qualities: color, caste, social standing, gender. There's even a translation in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 98, the Vaseta Sutta, that mentions, this is the latest version of the Wisdom Publishing Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, that talks about the ways of mating. So even what do they call it? Sexual orientation. Because the Buddha said none of these things are what discerns, what makes a person noble or not noble. What makes us noble is practicing sila, samadhi, panya. And so we want to be able to recognize that we want everyone to have the opportunity to really practice and to not be put down for any of those reasons that the Buddha said these are just labels. These are just things human beings make up to put themselves above someone else. And so we want to be careful about that and really care about each other, regardless of all of those other differences that really don't matter.
I just wanted to add a little bit to what Ayya said, which was really skillful and beautiful. And I think for me also as a bhikkhuni, having experienced being incredibly marginalized as the only bhikkhuni in the country where I live, It's really important to keep sight of why I'm doing this, and not to make an identity around being a bhikkhuni and the only one. And, you can get into a bit of a trough thinking that way. And at the same time, realizing that although it doesn't matter ultimately about race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, age, etc., there are impacts, there are implications. And for me, the biggest difficulty as a bhikkhuni is a lack of conditions to practice. And yes, it's all very well to say we can all get enlightened, but as the Buddha taught, it's a conditioned path. It's not that we can do it or can't do it. It's not about ability or lack of ability. So much of it is just about having the conditions, having, a safe and quiet place to practice, having enough food that's suitable for our body, that doesn't make us sick. For bhikkhunis, of course, having people to look after our basic needs. We can't handle money, just as the bhikkhus don't. We don't cook for ourselves unless it's kind of an emergency situation, like during the COVID pandemic or something like that. The Buddha said in times of danger and famine, monastics can cook, including the monks. But essentially, we're alms mendicants, so we depend on others for our existence, our survival. So it does have an impact if there are no places to practice. And both of us have actually had difficulty finding somewhere to base ourselves, and as a result have started our own places. So obviously that takes a great deal of work and time and energy. It's incredibly demanding of us. We have to learn to teach before we feel ready necessarily. I think both of us love to share the Dhamma, but I'm sure we would have liked to be enlightened first, The great monks that you see in the world did have those years and years and years of training in forests with great masters. We haven't had as much. So it's altogether more difficult, and both that can give rise to the challenges that can lead to good qualities developing if we can manage it. But unfortunately, a lot of women either don't manage to find an opportunity to ordain or later disrobe. The vast majority of bhikkhunis that I know, and other kinds of nuns as well, have disrobed due to a lack of conditions, not finding a place to actually live their monastic life. Whereas if you speak to Ajahn Brahm, he'll say the reason monastics disrobe is because of lust. It's because of, the opposite or the same gender. That is usually not the case for us. So they are real differences, I think, that we face. And of course, we've both taken the attitude that we want to make a change and we want to do something to make things easier for other women in the future. And so our efforts are fairly big, and the results are coming slowly. Yeah, I've been to see Ayya Santussika's beautiful monastery, Karuna Buddhist Vihara, both when you had the place rented in San Francisco and also, sorry, not San Francisco, it was Mountain View. Yeah, but that part of California, is it? Northern California. And also the Forest Hermitage that you've now managed to get, and it's beautiful. And hopefully we'll also be able to have like a rural place that's much bigger. We only have like 3 rooms in the house. So I'd like to invite all of you, but you won't fit at the moment. So it's not the monastic life I ever envisaged. I don't think I would have ever considered leading a community or being a teacher. Most monastics, they just want to disappear. So anyway. Yeah.
Everything she said is so true. And just to give you an example, this 3-month Vasa that I've been here at Jhana Grove is the first time in 15 years I've had a chance to have a fully supported 3-month retreat. And it's like there just aren't very many places that a bhikkhuni can go for that. And it's really a wonderful gift. And from the beginning of my listening to Ajahn Brahm, maybe 25 years ago, he would say monks and nuns, monks and nuns, monks and nuns. And everywhere else, all I heard was monks. And he would talk about the nuns. The Dhammasara monastery is really outstanding in the world of Theravada Buddhism. We just don't have places like that around the rest of the world, and that's what we hope will evolve.
All right. So this question, I think, should be for both of us, really. It's addressed to me. Thank you for your kindness. May I ask you a question about your story of becoming a bhikkhuni? Okay. All right. I am kind. I also have sometimes a bit of a pedantic streak. So just to say that I try not to think of this path as becoming anything. And it's interesting because when I first told my mom I want to go to India, she said, go to India and become a Buddhist nun. And I was a snotty teenager. I said, I won't become anything, because I thought that was silly, becoming or being something. So for me, it's been a path of gradual renunciation. And it did start with that trip to India when I was 19. Or you can trace it back. I mean, it's so funny giving stories because I realize this is just what we add to things to try and make sense. But actually, who knows? Probably the seeds were planted in many previous lives, I'm pretty certain. So it happened really, I think a search for meaning happened in my teens. When I was about 15, I suddenly, the pressure was on to choose subjects for your next exams and to figure out university and what you want to do with your life. And I just thought, how can I figure what I want to do with my life when I don't even know why I'm here? I don't even know really the purpose of being here. Like, is it to have a family and have a job and just like my parents, then get a house, then get, I don't know, a mortgage and get older and retire? Well, I mean, obviously, most people do that, and nuns also do that. They get older, I don't know if we do ever retire, but I just didn't really know the purpose of it, and I wanted to find out. And I think I was struck by the suffering that I sensed in the world and that felt very visceral to me at that age. Maybe you can say it was hormones, but it felt a bit deeper than that. So I wanted to understand what was going on in my mind. And I kind of suspected I'd have to leave England for that because I couldn't find answers around me or anyone to talk to. It was a real crisis. So when I was 19 with my best friend, we went to India. And I will cut a long story short because I have spoken about this before. And, it is a story. I don't know if this is really what happened or not. But I heard about meditation retreats that were 10 days and in complete silence with really a lot of discipline. And at that time, I was a very kind of free-spirited, quite adventurous young woman. So I'd been kind of all over by then. I'd been up the Himalayas and to the full moon parties and didn't get into big trouble with anything. But, I'd kind of seen a lot of life. And it was almost like a process of elimination. Okay, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. This doesn't make me happy, this doesn't make me happy. And then I heard about these retreats and I was fascinated. I thought, what will happen to my mind if I just sit with myself for 10 days without any distraction? Wow, will I kind of dig myself in a hole, or will the mind kind of bring itself out of suffering and start to really understand what's going on? So I was just like, sign me up. And in the very first retreat, the teachers did speak a bit about, of course, the Four Noble Truths, about dependent origination, about really how we do create a lot of suffering for ourselves. And I realized that, my goodness, suffering is a part of life, but there is a way out. It was just such an incredible relief to know that the Buddha was true to that. He was honest about it. He didn't just say, oh, there's something wrong with you, you're suffering. He said, no, that's the nature of existence. There's going to be suffering. But there is also a way out, and it's something that everyone can practice. And I actually practiced it in that retreat and got the benefits. I came out so deeply moved, and, things like, I don't know, little conflicts that I'd had with my parents as a teen. I was writing them letters and sort of saying, look, you never did anything wrong. It's not a sign that there was a problem that I traveled. It's a sign that you really supported me and gave me that confidence and courage. to explore things for myself. And I just continued the practice for the next 10 years or so, living in India, mostly in Nepal, and serving a lot on retreats like this, being the manager or the kitchen manager. And all the time keeping my ears and eyes open for a place to ordain. So it took 10 years to find somewhere initially. So again, that's just how difficult it is as a nun. I would have been ordained probably at 23, 24 if there would have been a place. But finally, after about 10 years, I heard about a place in Myanmar where I could ordain, and I had instant confidence that this was the place for me. So that was in 2006. And since then, I think many of you know, but I was there for about 4 years. Then soon after that, heard about Ajahn Brahm and just had a very strong sense that this is my teacher. I have to go and learn from him. So that's why I'm sitting here. Right. So yeah, I guess a short story would be suffering and a wish to find freedom from suffering. That's the reason that I'm doing this. Yeah. Ayya, I think we need your story.
I think I've always been interested in spiritual pursuits, questions, understanding how to be a good person, understanding the deep questions of life. But I wasn't satisfied at all with the religion I was raised in. It was a pretty fundamentalist Christianity in the Midwest in the U.S. But when my father died suddenly when I was 40 years old, then I really had that sense of urgency to dig deeper. And I really wanted to understand what happens when you die. Because I wasn't at all prepared for that. My whole family, they live to be very old. His father, my grandfather, was still alive. Some of his aunties lived in past 100 years old. And we thought he'd go on for a long time, but he died at the age of 69 very suddenly from a cardiac thoracic aneurysm. Not cardiac, but anyway, you get. And I had been married and I had 2 children. And my son at that time was halfway through college. And he and I both were so impacted by this experience that we both were looking for a spiritual path. And he found Buddhism, and I entered an interfaith seminary in California to become a minister. He traveled to Thailand eventually and got ordained when he was 24 at Wat Pah Nanachat. He got ordained at Wat Pah Pong, but he lived at Wat Pah Nanachat, and I went to see him and got to spend time there. I went often and spent significant amount of time with the monks. And because my son was a monk, I had, opportunity to really talk to the monks a lot and also visit other great teachers in Thailand. And that's what helped my faith to develop. So at the same time I was going through this 4-year seminary, whenever I had breaks, I'd go to Thailand, and it was a beautiful 4 years of deepening practice, understanding Dhamma, developing my faith. It was incredible. And then I knew I wanted to become a nun. And my life changed. The circumstances of my life changed in a way that I could do that in 2004. And it was 2005 when I first took robes and continued on from there. It was hard to find a place to do it, and then it was hard to find a place to really continue on, on towards higher ordination. But it happened, and I have so much gratitude for all of the disciples of Ajahn Chah that have been my teachers, and also some of the monks in the Dhamma Youth Order also. And it's just, it's like finding gold. My partner of many years is very critical of me and controlling. They did not want me to come to this retreat. If I'm kind to him when I get home, will he stop trying to control me? I'm worried I'll fall back into my conditioned behavior of trying to please him. Thank you. I've been through this, so I understand. And it depends. I mean, there are half a dozen questions I wish I could ask you. But without that, to just say in general, I don't think kindness will cause him to stop wanting to control you. Wanting power and control over another person is actually the root of all abuse, domestic violence. And it's important to try to assess just, how serious this problem is. First and foremost, be safe. If you feel like you're in danger, leave if you can. If it's more psychological, which is still damaging, see if you can find some expert support to advise you. If you want to contact me, you can write to me at santussika@karunabv.org. That's my email. Karuna for Karuna Buddhist Vihara, and then bv.org. If you have someone else that you can confide in who has experience, that's great. And just because it's very important to not have this kind of pressure in your life and lack of ease. And it might be possible that, his conditioning could change. It just depends. It depends. And so it's not easy to give the answer that will really help you. I think you're on the right track to ask. I think knowing that it's not beneficial to you or to him to continue in this way. And that it's good to find how to take steps towards a resolution that leads to mutual respect and trust. And you're really not alone. There are so many relationships and so many people who have this same kind of problem. And, you can look at what is underlying that for him. It's conditioning, just like, the other things that drive us. And it's important to see if there's any chance that he'll want to change. Sometimes even with, a marriage counseling or whatever other kind of steps you might take, a person will say they want to change, but they don't really change. They don't really want to change. And so if that's the case, you may want to think about leaving.
Venerable, what do you find difficult to live the life of a monastic? I think I answered that. I spoke mostly about finding conducive conditions and actually living the life of a monastic in conducive conditions. I find completely wonderful, meaningful, freeing, conducive to developing a lot of inner happiness, a lot of loving kindness. So it really depends on the conditions. Even when the conditions are difficult, though, I think living the life that really calls you and that really means a lot to you and benefits others is just the biggest blessing. So even, I went through a big burnout a few years ago, like proper adrenal fatigue. Everybody says these days, oh, today I'm feeling burnt out. I don't mean like I'm feeling a bit tired. I mean, I had adrenal fatigue. The charts showed that you're meant to get your adrenaline coming up about here. And it goes like this during the day. Well, mine started down here and it just flatlined, completely flatlined. And, I've been through health crises. I've been through not having anywhere to stay, but something has always kept me going. And I think it's not only the sense of purpose and meaning and the sense of a calling, it's also a great deal of faith. Because from the time I started the practice, really, I felt I understood why I'm here and what I have to do. And then when I met my first teacher, my preceptor in Myanmar, he said to me, if you ordain, is it for life? And I just very easy as anything said yes, and I think having said that and meant it to a great teacher who I had enormous respect for gives some kind of power to what I'm up to. So I fall back on those things and it's amazing. But once you do renounce, and I guess that's why I like to think of it as renunciation rather than becoming something. Once you renounce, it's almost like the momentum is so strong, you can't imagine going back. It's almost impossible. So the only times I really feel despair are when I wonder whether my monastic life is viable or not. Then I feel despair. Yeah, yeah. But even then, we have the Dhamma, and that's the important thing. And I've seen so many practitioners come to the Dhamma, get benefit, and then for a few years they kind of lose track, they go off the track, or so they think. And whenever they sort of make contact, and say, oh, my practice has kind of gone down the drain, I've started breaking my precepts, and I always say, don't worry, you'll get back. Because I think once you've tasted this and once you know there is a path, it's very hard to forget. And it comes up when you really need it. You'll hit a time in your life and that will be the only answer. So it's a privilege. But yes, the difficulties, I think, for me are probably the finding the conditions. And at the moment, it's practical, okay? So I'll just say I work probably, I start at about 7 in the morning. This is after the morning meditation. And I'm looking at my emails before breakfast because it's too many to finish otherwise. Then I meet my guests and I do the work meeting, have conference calls, have more emails, organize events, have lunch, meet the lunch guests, give counseling, have a little rest before I completely flag. And then the same thing all afternoon. I'm busy, busy, busy. Because it's not just running a place. We're trying to raise funds for a proper monastery where I can have seclusion and a place that can attract other women to come and have a peaceful life. So at the moment, that is also difficult. Just the sheer amount of work involved. And of course, being alone, as a monastic, we're meant to be together when we leave our lives or certainly simplify and make a lot of changes. Our relationships with our families change. It's not that we don't still have mothers, fathers, sisters, daughters, sons. We don't cut off from them, but our relationships with them change. And in a sense, the Sangha becomes our family. When we take the ordination, we say, may the Sangha lift us up out of compassion. Anukampa upadaya. It means lift me up out of anukampa, out of compassion for me. So our refuge is the Sangha, and we need each other. It's been wonderful to spend the rains here together. 2 bhikkhunis in a monk's monastery. It's great to have our brothers, but there's some things that only bhikkhunis can really share and understand. How it feels to be here as women in a monk's place. And we do things differently, you know. We maybe do have a slightly different relationship to, say, the Vinaya or to the way we teach. So it's really important that we have our sisters around us. What in the Vinaya for nuns? What is in the Vinaya? Do you find what do you find the most unfair for women? I don't know that anything's really unfair, I wouldn't say, because I think we have to see it in context. And the Vinaya, I have confidence that the Buddha laid down these training precepts, and I say that carefully, because some people think they're like laws or rules, but they're training precepts for our own benefit and our freedom. So if there is something there that seems overly strict or stricter for women than it would be for monks, then sometimes I wonder if it's the interpretation we're giving to it, is it the translation, is it the way we hold it, is it the context of ancient India, that made that rule or that training necessary, such as, for example, walking alone. Actually, it says between villages. One shouldn't walk alone between villages. Sometimes it's translated as among. And because of that, some monks say, oh, it's impossible for women to be bhikkhunis because you have to go everywhere yoked to another bhikkhuni. And of course, it's hard enough to find one bhikkhuni, so I'd be finished. In England, I couldn't go anywhere. I'd be housebound, and even that wouldn't be allowed, I think. So that isn't what it means. It means to go between villages. And in ancient India, those villages may have been in completely different areas where the language was different, where, no sensible person would go because of the risk to their safety. And so this was there for the protection. So if we look at what that means now, to me it would mean going somewhere that I would feel obviously ill at ease, unsafe, and I'd be endangering myself. And if I endanger myself, I endanger my whole community because there'll be no teacher, there'll be no leader anymore. So I see it as an invitation to protect my well-being, and I hope other bhikkhunis protect theirs, but I don't think it's supposed to inhibit our ability to make choices for our benefit, and go on alms round in villages or in towns, travel by flight to Perth. Because there are people around, right? Yeah. So, would you like to answer the same?
Yeah, I think I just want to both echo and maybe add a little bit more to what you were saying. I had the same immediate thought, the unfair, if it's unfair, I feel like it's the interpretation of the Bhikkhuni Vinaya that makes it rigid and actually really fuels that sexism. And it's unnecessary. If you really understand the Vinaya for the bhikkhunis, it's all about being protected. And, the Buddha had these various conditions. He wanted to inspire faith in the faithless and maintain faith of the faithful and, do things that would create ease in the community and, help people develop. This Vinaya is a container that is the most conducive to awakening. And it is. I don't see the Vinaya as a problem at all. It's the interpretations that make it possible to use some of those rules, almost weaponize them, you might say. And so that's unfortunate. And we have plenty of support from various scholars in the Theravadan world that see the Vinaya more for what it is and how it describes a really beautiful life that can be lived by women following it. Honored and joyful at your presence during this retreat. Yeah, me too. I have been practicing forgiveness for past hurts, especially towards an angry parent. while I'm able to relate more peacefully with them now, I catch aversion arising within my mind occasionally. Could you share advice on patience and forgiveness? Oh. Well, you're really on your way. I see, and I actually feel it in the question, this development of patience and forgiveness in yourself, which is beautiful. And, you know, when the Buddha said patient endurance was really the highest austerity, that's true. And it's so important to the whole practice of the path, the patience with ourselves as those conditioned patterns continue to come up, and to remember that when that aversion arises, it's not yours, it's not you. And you can, sharpening the mindfulness, you're already noticing when it comes. Just don't own it, don't identify with it. Remember that it's a passing, it's old, and it passes away. It comes and goes, but it's old. And the more you just see it with that same kind of forgiveness and tenderness, and not pick it up, the more it'll fade. And there's another kind of approach that I like when we have feelings arising that are challenging, to really locate where you feel it in your body. It's in your chest or your stomach or wherever, and be present with that physical feeling, that feeling in your body, until it passes away. And that's a very good way to let the whole kind of complex of conditioned experience that kind of comes up, dissolve. If you stay with that kind of feeling until it goes away and you don't do anything to engage it other than observe it with mindfulness, then it will lose its power. And this is true of all kinds, even very intense feelings. And they come back again, but they don't have as much force. So it sounds like you're well on your way to freedom from this, but it can take a long time, and it's okay. Just keep receiving it, not acting on it, not owning it, watching it, and letting it go.
What is considered craving? Anything that makes you suffer. A person requesting for his favorite food during his last leg of life, would it be considered craving? I think you can do that. Yeah. I mean, even for us as monastics, time and again, Ajahn Brahm encourages me to say, to my supporters when they say, is there anything you can eat? Is there anything you can't eat? Tell them. Because we really do have to look after our body. So, obviously the whole purpose of the path, I hope it's obvious, is to lessen craving, especially towards anything in the realm of the five senses at first, right? Sight, sound, smells, taste, and touch. Because we can have a certain amount of gratification. There's a certain amount of pleasure that we can experience through the senses, but ultimately it doesn't last. And it's not really satisfying in the way that peace of mind can be. Even any amount of meditation. You may all feel that, you're not very far on yet on your practice, but we walked in today and it was like, whew, so peaceful. And you've not left. So probably you're already appreciating even the fact that you can't get your big, chocolate smoothie shakes with ice cream or noodles. I know Singaporeans love noodles and stuff. Sorry, I'm putting ideas into your heads. But, you'd rather be here, right? You'd rather be here just sitting nice and maybe not even that comfortable, but sitting on your seats and listening to shaven-headed nuns. So there's a difference there in the quality of happiness that you can receive through turning the mind to wholesomeness compared to craving for things. So, there's a difference also between having preferences, I would say, like if it's just a choice of food, or even a choice of clothing, choose something that's comfortable, right? But when it goes into, I have to have the latest design, if I get that, then it's a sign that I'm successful, and this person doesn't have it, but I'm doing great, or you feel really miserable because, I don't know, you don't have as big a house as your neighbor, then yeah, there's a certain amount of craving and a misplaced sense of where happiness really lies, let's say. So rather than judging yourself for that, just develop the inner happiness. And in my experience, again, why I call this path of renouncing, I said it started with suffering, but it also really took off when I realized that the more I practiced, the more I meditated, the less I needed anything in the outside world or anything that was really stimulating. My first big love as a teenager was music, probably all my life. I was into my rock music and all kinds of music and spent hours putting all my favorite songs on little cassettes to take with me, on the buses in India. But then after my first retreat, I just found it was a distraction. I didn't need it anymore. And it wasn't a condemnation of that music. I just felt more at peace to be present with what was around me. I wanted to be there with the chickens on the bus and the goats and all the jostling and the noise and, the horns that beep every corner in India. And I just wanted to be present to life. Obviously, there were no televisions. I think I sent my first email about 6 years into my travel ever in my life when I was 25. That's a big suffering. Internet. Yeah. So I think it's, you can't really overcome craving through trying not to want what you want. You have to be honest to it, but just notice that sometimes there's this agitation, or there's a kind of sense of need, and see if you can be with that the way that Ayya was beautifully explaining it. Get into your body and notice it when it arises. Notice the tension or the kind of the lack of contentment that gives rise to that craving, and just see if you can stay with it. See if sometimes you can use a bit of restraint maybe, and have your favorite food sometimes but not always, and see how does that feel. So as monastics, we don't get to choose our food really. Again, we can choose to a degree, like we can say what's healthy for us, but if it doesn't come that day, we have to be satisfied with what's there. So yeah, contentment and satisfaction, inner satisfaction, are more nourishing than having our senses satisfied, if it's even possible. Anyway, we have not so long left, but we'll try and do a few more, yeah? Yeah.
Did you say the last leg of life? Comfort food is okay on your last leg of life. There's a lot of things that are uncomfortable in the last leg of life. I'm almost 70. I hear you. It's okay. Dear Venerable, did Ajahn invite the Devas down to cook our lunches? We promise we won't tell him if you said anything. I don't know.
That's a sign that your senses are waking up. I'm sure there's a lot of Devas here, though. Whether they're in the kitchen or not, who knows? All right. We don't have a lot of time and quite a few questions yet. So I don't know. What do you think? Should we just speed up a bit? Yeah? All right. All right. Many Dhamma talks mention that dukkha arises in the heart. Unsatisfactoriness, lack of fulfillment, not having things the way we want them to be. This is the reality, to which my friend shares that the reality is too much for her to accept. She's gone through some hurt in her past. How can my friend see the Dhamma or reality in a happier way? Thank you. Um, well, I'm getting a little tired and I know we have to speed up, so I'm going to be brief, but I think it's important to respect where a person's at most of all, and not to try to bring the point home if she's not ready to understand it. Again, if somebody starts to meditate and feel a little bit of peace inside, then they realize this path is not a miserable path. It's not a pessimistic path. It's a path that leads to freedom from suffering. And even if you don't realize that you're suffering, and you can't accept that that the reality, as you say here, is, that things are never going to be the way we want. When we meditate, we realize, oh, actually, maybe there were things in my life that caused suffering that I can now adjust. So little by little, we start to understand the nature of suffering, the nature of unsatisfactoriness, but we also have something else. So of course it's too much to hear that, there's no happiness in this world, or, what did Ajahn Chah say? Joy at last, to know there's no happiness in this world. Joy because he had the inner joy. Yeah. So try not to, at least I find from my own experience, that I have to try not to talk about the doctrine to people, but rather encourage them to come and see for themselves. That's what the Buddha did too. He said, Ehi bhikkhu, ehi bhikkhuni, come and see the Dhamma. And also, please don't force it. Just be a good person, be a kind friend, and show the results of the Dhamma in your own conduct. And then that way they'll get attracted.
We have 4 questions, and 2 of them are similar to things we've already talked about. What inspired you to become bhikkhunis, and what was the journey like? Could you please say a few words about what you're doing and how we can help you? So I'm just going to say a tiny bit about, visiting bhikkhunis, encouraging people to you notice that there is something happening, and supporting it in whatever way, participating. Visiting is really nice because then you can really get a sense of what happens in the monastery and how the bhikkhunis operate. We're different than monks in some ways, and some people really benefit from that. I think you're going to get this one, my friend. And this one I will take. Do you want to go first or second? Oh, no. Okay. Dear Bhikkhunis, had you experienced a jhana prior to becoming a nun? I'm worried that if I have more and more deep meditations, that I will want to be ordained as a monk, which is unsettling as I love my partner and family and I don't want to leave them. Yeah. That's not a yeah about jhana. I'm not going to answer that. Certainly samadhi. You have various experiences, and what I want to say about you leaving this world, because we see the suffering in it, but something happens. Even that kind of, I did have the experience of really seeing the dukkha in all kinds of things that we engage in as human beings. And then I saw the dukkha in family. And it changed how I felt about everyone in my life. But the change was one of a lessening of that kind of attachment that is so personal. My daughter, my son, my parent, whatever, my partner. And it became much more of that unconditional love. So you don't have to change your whole life. You can take the path all the way to the end as a layperson. You might want to get ordained right there at the end. I don't know. But it's the it's the deep understanding and embodiment of the Dhamma that will actually be better for everyone in your life, including you. So don't put the brakes on your practice. Orient it towards being um, a source of real unconditional love to the people in your life. And I have a wonderful relationship with my daughter who has I have grandchildren and my son. And I'm there for them to support them. But when something goes wrong, last year my granddaughter had a ruptured appendix. And I came to help the family. And I know she could have died right there. It wasn't a problem for me. I knew my role would be to help my daughter because she was not prepared for that. And so the more you practice, the deeper it goes, the less attached you will be, and the freer those people that you love will be, and the more you will be able to support them.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. I also, just to add very briefly, it's just to echo really, I think the path works in beautiful ways, and by the time you would reach that point, you'd be ready. You know, yeah. Okay, I have a chronic illness which will eventually get harder. I'm not sure. Better, which will eventually get better. Oh, that's good. Is that right? Usually chronic illnesses get worse, don't they? They'll get better, but you'll still die. That's the problem. It's a bummer, isn't it? You get better like a year and a year before you're 80, and then, sorry, sorry about that. But I struggle with the impact of my illness, that the illness has on my family, particularly my partner. Can you advise me? I'm more used to being the carer than the cared for. Yeah, isn't it amazing how sometimes these roles have to change? And maybe that's one challenge or opportunity for growth that your illness can offer, you know, how to allow yourself to be cared for, how to allow yourself to be loved and to receive the kindness of others. Ajahn Brahm mentioned a beautiful phrase this morning, which was actually something I'd said to him this retreat. He said, sometimes when you're sick, it's almost worth it for the kindness that you receive. And I actually said that to him this rains because I was really quite ill, in the sense that I kept having this really severe reflux and incredible amounts of belching due to, anyway, lots of conditions that had eventually resulted in a hernia that made it almost impossible to sit. I'm very lucky today that something shifted and I can sit for a while now, but my experience on the retreat has been that if I sit for more than, I don't know, a few hours a day, it worsens the condition so that I can't really meditate for the next couple of weeks. And as a bhikkhuni, that's pretty challenging, right? But the kindness from everybody I've received here has just been so touching. And, you know, whatever I've needed has been provided. But more than that, people have said, what else, you know? Okay, you've told us what kind of food, but anything else? You know, is there anything we can get you? And just that acceptance has taught me so much. You know, it's taught me to accept the condition, to accept the fact that this retreat didn't look quite like how my retreats normally go. Normally I like to be sitting 10, 12 hours a day effortlessly. I just love to do it. And this time I had to learn to practice in different postures. I had to do more walking. I had to keep my mind states wholesome. I realized, you know, it's not my body that meditates, it's my mind. So I carry my mind everywhere, every moment of the day. I can always be making peace, being kind, being really gentle, which includes patience, which includes just being present with what is at any given time. So I have had to learn to receive the kindness of others, not to feel guilty about that, you know, and not to feel guilty about disturbing my dear fellow bhikkhuni in the cottage when I've had those bouts. You've been very, very gracious. And more than anything, learn to care for myself. This is the challenge, especially if we have an identity of being the carer, the one who cares for others. I'm also a very giving, caring, kind of other-centric type of person, and I also see there's a shadow side to that. There's an aspect of I need to be able to help others to be worthwhile, to be valued, to be loved. Of course, that's not the reason that I care. I genuinely feel for the suffering of others, but sometimes I forget that care has to extend to myself. So this may be part of your practice, to notice, that you are used to being the carer, and to see if you can stay with some of the discomfort around that. And maybe rather than apologize, for the trouble that you think you're causing to everybody, actually thank them for the care that they give to you, because people love to help. People, just as you love to care for others, I'm sure your partner loves to care for you. So rather than, kind of get into a sort of feeling of not being worthy, or, having to explain yourself or apologize, maybe just tell them how much you appreciate their care at this time, and the tables will turn. You actually say you're getting better, which is wonderful. So there'll be a time when it's your turn again to give, and it's their turn to receive. So this changes throughout our lives, and part of that is also the practice of being bhikkhunis. We have to learn to receive. We go on arms round with our bowls. We have to make ourselves vulnerable to the kindness of others, and it's such a blessing. I think we see the very best in humanity. We're really often on the receiving end of a lot of generosity. It supports our very existence. My very life is sustained by the gifts of others. This should be reflected upon again and again, the Buddha taught. And it's really true. If there wasn't goodness in this world, the Sangha couldn't exist. So see if you can receive some of that kindness and care, and even more internalize that. Yeah, internalize that towards your body, towards your mind. So, and just to end with the question about how you can support us and support bhikkhunis, I would say get to know our projects, get to know what we're doing, come to the teachings. We both offer a lot of online classes. I have some leaflets outside you can have a look at. You've given your website. They can go to karunabv.org. Ours is Anukampa Project. Anukampa, again, compassion that lifts you up. Anukampaproject.org. We have Ajahn Brahm coming every year. Ajahn Brahmali sometimes comes to visit. We've got hundreds of teachings on our channel. So you can actually come on Zoom, or you can just engage. And if you are ever, in England, of course, visit. But otherwise, we have many volunteers from overseas and people who can get involved remotely. But more than anything, I would say it's really your practice, because that's what we're doing this for. It's to try and further the Dhamma, to, bring the teachings of early Buddhism as best we understand them and in the way we practice them to as many people as possible. So that is the best way to support the sasana and to be one of this fourfold assembly. We have now bhikkhunis, bhikkhus, laymen, laywomen, and also gender non-binary people. So I think it's more than the fourfold assembly. It's just the worldwide assembly that covers all kinds of people. So yeah, just keep on practicing and generating goodness in your lives, and see if you can share that goodness with all those around you and wherever your heart is called. So yeah, I wonder if Ayya has any closing words. I would, for my part, like to thank everybody and just wish you a really good retreat. And yeah, I'll be leaving on the 31st. You'll be leaving tomorrow. Oh, I will be one. Yeah, so goodbye and keep going.
Yeah, thank you all for your practice. It's really beautiful to be here and feel it. And I hope that the rest of the retreat goes very well for all of you. Safe journey back to where you live, and take good care.
You don't have to restrain yourself with nuns. I've taught my community how to do it completely over the top sadhus, and it really is. I noticed I was the loudest the other night, so come on, we'll try. We'll try and show you how it goes. All right.